Hello, my name is Jennifer East, and I thought I'd do another short video. Sorry, I haven't done one for a while, but I thought I'd talk about school, several places that I've gone to school. Like I said, this is these videos are mainly to kind of do, like I said, a video journal, and also a way of helping me keep track of things that have happened, so that just in case anything ever happens with my memory and I become just as uh, forgetful as my grandmother. I'll talk about that later, but this way I can be able to, have it, continue with the timeline. Um, but so just to start out, again, I obviously started in Cheyenne. I did go to a preschool. I have to admit, I don't remember which one it is. It's obviously before while I was still very young. And when I first went to school, I went to a school to kindergarten at a place called Fairview, which is about 4 blocks away from the house I grew up in Cheyenne. And then from first through third grade, I went to a place called Lebhart, and it's over in, if you have any knowledge of Cheyenne, it's over by like be a little bit beyond Nation Way, behind the Goodwill. I'm not even sure if it's still there anymore. I'd have to check. But then I went back to Fairview from the time I was 4th grade to 6th grade. And then when I was in junior high, now Cheyenne is a little bit different. At one time, they didn't have kindergarten, they didn't have high school starting at 9th grade as a freshman, but they did change that eventually. But I went to Cary Junior High from when I was in 7th grade to 9th grade, and then, of course, when I went to high school, I went to a place called Cheyenne East High, which is actually where my mother graduated from. I might talk about some about in another video. After I was in high school, I went to, again, UW in Laramie for about 3 years. And I was out of school for a little bit. I was in Cheyenne for about a year, and then I moved to Denver. And when I was in Denver, I think it was starting around 1998, I think. I went to the Metropolitan State College of Denver, and also, just as a side note, I did go to LCCC for a bit, but I took a couple classes in high school because they had a program where I could actually take certain classes for high school that if I didn't want to take them as a high school class, because I had a really big problem in my 10th year. I think it was my 10th year of Algebra 2. So what I ended up doing is I went to took it over at LCCC, and not just once or twice. Math is not one of my strong points, unfortunately. And I also took 6 credits of between a geology class and an astronomy class, because they had what they called an earth science class, but they said it was for idiots, for lack of a nicer way of putting it. And I took those classes when I was still in high school. Those were actually pretty enjoyable. And I did take some classes while I was at UW. Sometimes I would take summer classes. One time I ended up taking this interesting situation where I was taking a morning class over at LCCC and an afternoon class over at UW, and there was 2 weeks where they actually overlapped each other, so I was actually having to commute back and forth, which was an interesting situation. Like for one of the weeks, the morning class was like before 1 week before the UW class, and then the UW class was a week after the LCCC class had ended. And then, like I said, I went to Metropolitan State College for a couple of years. And then when I was in the middle of trying to still take more classes, my son was born. And it took me until, I think if I remember right, I went to school again from like 2003 to 2007, 2005, excuse me. And then that's when I was before I ended up living in Thornton, which was, like I said, was in class where I ended up meeting the woman that I was going to end up being a roommate with, which is another situation I might talk about eventually. Um, and I hadn't taken a class for a while. And when I moved out of the house in Thornton, of course, I moved back in with my mother, and I took one class over at LCCC. It was a Japanese class. It was like in 2000. I think if I remember right, it was like 2007 to 2000. Excuse me, 2000. Yeah, late 2000. 2008 to 2009, because I was actually taking classes while, unfortunately, my mother was after her accident and all that. And I haven't taken a class since. I'm kind of still working on trying to see if I can possibly go back to school. So there are certain problems because I didn't get any money for financial aid for when I was over at Metro the last time. So I owe them money, and I was also told, and I have to look into this because again I want to make sure I have enough money if I can go. That supposedly certain classes aren't viable, as I said, after about 7 years. So I would need to find out if any of my credits are still even doable, because that would also mean that if that was the case, if none of them are viable anymore, that would mean I would probably have to start all over again. But it would also make me wonder if there would be any more impediments to me getting financial aid. The only other thing is, of course, unfortunately, I'm also in arrears on my student loans, which it's a different kind of problem. Unfortunately, every time I do my taxes, they usually take my money from my taxes, which it sucks, but it could be worse. I'm gonna try to see if there's any way I can possibly get those um, dealt with, as in maybe get them written off or however they going to do it. So there's certain things that I need to do before I try to go back to school. Hopefully soon I will be able to do that. I was hoping to try to see if I can get enrolled this year, but probably isn't going to be looking like that. So, and the other thing is I need to make sure I do my FAFSA form, which is the thing you have to fill out for financial aid, and usually you have to do that around January when you start getting your taxes. So hopefully, I can be able to start doing that, and um, if any of my credits are still available, it would be nice to at least possibly finish my theater major. Like I said, I was a music and a theater major at one time, but we'll see how well that works. If nothing else, if I can't, then I might just start over and maybe go for like a psychology degree, because even though I love theater, I might do it as a minor or something like that. But I do love psychology. It's always been a fascination of mine, and I'm not excessively well versed on psychology, but I've read quite a bit psychology books, just because I used to read them, especially when I was having problems with anxiety and depression, and I was trying to get some insight as to what was going on with why I was having these kind of problems and whatnot. It's so my interest in psychology is also one reason why I started finding out about narcissistic abuse and all that. Which when I started looking into that, it was the last thing that finally clicked, and I'm like, okay, this makes sense of how everything would happen. So um, that is, again, this is another one where I'm like I said, trying to do the timeline. So just trying to give some insight as to what was going on. And I might talk about some of the classes I've taken, just because some of them were actually rather fascinating. Um, I'm actually like my mother and my mother and my father, excuse me. Both of them were just, I really believe if they had the money, they would have just been permanent students and just never really worked. But that's not what real life is about. Like I said, they were both linguists. Like when my mother graduated, she had like something like 202 courses. When I couldn't take any classes anymore, I had 150 credits. That's one reason why I couldn't get any more financial aid, unfortunately. My father had a one master's degree, and he was trying to go for a second one, and that didn't end up working out because he was trying to get him a second master's in Russian. And then when he finally figured out he doesn't really enjoy being around Russian people, for lack of a nicer way of putting it, he decided to drop some of that, because at one time he was not only had a master's degree, but again, like I said, he taught English, and he knew so many languages. It was ridiculous, but it was from partly from both of them, and especially from my grandmother. It's one reason why I really do enjoy being in college and enjoy learning things, because it's always been a very stimulating situation. When I'm only working and just working, it just kind of becomes a complete grind. So, again, so that's another one of my videos on my timeline, and I will hopefully be able to give some more later. I actually have a possibility of maybe getting a vehicle, and I'll definitely talk about some of the vehicles I've had. Some of them, especially my last one, I had a truck that was having problems, to say the least, and it was insane and ridiculous. But if I do get a vehicle, then I really do want to start going to some of the places that I used to go to school, used to live, used to work, and, give some more insight into that. So hopefully all of you are having a lovely time, no matter what time or place you are, and you guys enjoy your day or your evening or whatever. Thank you. Bye-bye.